Okay, guys, good morning. Thank you for spending your Saturday morning with me. So today we are going to be talking about the basics of tropicals. So covering basically the three main points, which is going to be watering, pots and soil, and also light, right? And then all the fun stuff in between that keeps them happy. I want to start this off by reminding everyone that everyone's houses are different and different temperatures. And, sometimes this plant will do great here and then it won't do great there, right? So this stuff is just the basics to come back to if your plant is not looking happy, not feeling happy, right? But, some people have a 30-year-old cactus and it's been in the same dirt in the same pot for those 30 years, and that's okay, right? But if it starts to show signs where it's not happy, this is what you're going to come back to and remember. Okay? So we're going to start first off with watering, which is the key of everything. Okay? When I help people find plants here, that is the number one thing I ask them is, do you tend to overwater or underwater? And a lot of people overwater. Okay? So overwatering, this is the number one thing I want you to take away from this seminar, okay? Overwatering is how often, not how much, okay? So you can give a plant 5 liters of water. If you do that 3 times a week, that's overwatering, okay? So that is the key thing ever, okay? So with watering, most houseplants, I'm going to say most because you have some really tropical ones that need slightly more water, okay? This also goes for orchids, okay? We hear a lot of people, oh, I give my orchid an ice cube. No more ice cubes. No more ice cubes, okay? So everything likes to be thoroughly watered, okay? So a full thorough water is if you have a plant in here, per se, okay? A full thorough water is until water comes out the bottom of the pot. So whether that is into your sink, whether that's into your shower, or into a saucer, that is a full thorough water. It's making sure that the roots are fully getting watered, right? If you don't see water come out the bottom of the pot, then that means the roots are not getting watered, okay? And people will be like, oh, I'm watering, I swear. Okay, it has to come out the bottom. And then any extra water that comes out at the bottom needs to be emptied out, right? We don't want root rot. If it's sitting in water, it's not going to like that, right? For a short period of time, because there is people who water from the bottom up, okay? So watering in a saucer, I do this with some of my plants. I do it with my calatheas, okay? I set them in a bowl of water until it soaks a good bit of it up, okay? So usually for 30 minutes, 45 minutes, okay? And then when it soaks up, that's great. And then when it doesn't, empty out, okay? So a good rule of thumb to tell, especially at this time of year, is you're going to be cutting back how often you water, okay? So most plants right now can go 2+ weeks without water, as long as you're giving it that thorough water when you do, okay? So a good rule of thumb is always to check it with your finger. If you feel any moisture, it's good, because sometimes the top layer will dry out, right? If it's in a super hot room, it might dry out faster, okay? And most plants, again, water right into the soil is the best way to go. And I know there's a lot of people who like to mist, okay? So misting is good for pests. If you're doing the direct mist, it's great for pests. Misting your plant is not creating that amount of humidity that it would need. If you want to create more humidity for your plant, right, especially at this time of year, a good thing to do is to take a tray, put some rock in the tray, and you're actually going to set your pot right on top of the rocks. So it's not sitting in the water, but it's getting that humidity and it's constant, right? Because misting doesn't do that, right? It's good to wipe off the leaves. It's, again, good for pests. It's not going to create that humidity, right? Like when we humidify in here, we soak the floor because then it takes a long time, right? Okay. So that is one thing with humidity, and they all benefit off of it, especially at this time of year. If you're looking at, we are going to check in with the cactuses and succulents with watering. So these are going to be, at this time of year, a rare water. I'm talking once a month, okay? Once a month with succulents, thoroughly, okay? And I know some of you are probably going to be thinking, I've had pots that don't have holes in them. Then you're going to be mindful of how much water you give them, right? If it doesn't have a drainage hole, that is okay. You just have to be more cautious of how much water you give it. Ideally, you'd get some rock in the bottom just to help with that drainage, right? So if you accidentally give it too much, it's not in the soil, right? Or if you have a pot that you love, you can just set it in there, take it out to water, put it back, okay? I know we got some cactus requests today. So cactuses, they like to be ignored very heavily, okay? We will get to them in the lighting situation because that is their key component. But with watering, dry, 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 dry. Like, shouldn't be living dry, okay? That is that with cactuses. If you like to move your cactuses out in springtime and in summer when we're hitting the 40s, that's different, okay? You're going to be giving it water. By no means does it need to be soaked, right? But it can take that water when it's nice and hot and that water is getting absorbed, okay? Same with these guys here. So these are kind of a cross middle between a cactus and succulent. These are what I give people. These are called Haworthias. I call them the bulletproof plant because this is what I give people if they have a hard time with plants. These guys, okay? My grandma and I, we each have one. My grandma has one that is probably older than me, and it's about yay big. They're very slow growing, and you ignore them. If you forget to water this for 4 months, that's okay. It's happy, okay? So easiest plant ever, it'd be the Haworthia, okay? We hear a lot of, we're going to touch base on the air plants here. Air plants don't need soil. They obviously need air, but they do need water, okay? They don't just hang out, they do need water, okay? Thankfully, they're very easy. So this right here is Spanish moss, and this is going to be just one of your traditional air plants. These are very funky names. Yeah, Concolor compact, right? Very slow growing. 2 different types here, but they get watered the same. All air plants get watered the same. You're going to soak them in a bowl of water for 30, 20 minutes once a week. Let them air dry. If you keep them in a bowl, let them air dry so they're not dripping and, again, sitting in water. Okay? So there is certain plants that store a lot of water in them. Ponytail palms being one of them, and aloe vera. Okay? So aloe vera is going to be the same. They don't need a lot of water at this time of year, right? If you're going to be moving it outside in bright and direct so you're not scorching the leaves, they do need that full thorough water as well. Inside, not as often. Again, soil fully dried and then you give it a water, right? Yeah. So aloe vera, if you have it outside and it's getting absorbed, especially in our high heat, you could be watering it sometimes twice a week in the hot times, right? But right now, we have quite a few, and we water them once every couple weeks. Let the soil be like, ooh, that's really dry, guys. That's really dry. Then you water it. Yeah, okay? So another rule of thumb with watering is you can come back from too dry. It is hard, and sometimes you can't come back from too wet, okay? And at this time of year, we see a lot of people going on trips, right? You're going on trips, you're leaving your plants. If you can't have someone look after your plants, and unless you're going for a very long time, we see people have those water bulbs. Yeah, those water bulbs, or they'll get those wine bottles that have the attachment to it, okay? Ideally, that doesn't work for an extended period of time, and it doesn't work well on large plants. On small plants, that's fine, right? That's totally okay. Large plants, it doesn't. So say that you're gone for 2 weeks, full thorough water, and it's going to be fine for 2 weeks. It's going to be fine, right? 3 weeks even, you're fine. As long as you give it that full water before you go, like 9 times out of 10, your plant is going to forgive you when you come back, okay? So that is the golden rule with watering, is how often, not how much. Next, we're going to talk about lighting, okay? So this is where you need to look at your house, right? Look at your house. How many windows do you have? How often is your living room light on, right? Houseplants don't need sunlight to live, as long as there is a form of light, okay? Sunlight is ideal because it has the warmth, right? It has that vitamin D. They like that, right? But I have a lot of plants in my bathroom, and they thrive off of a grow light that I have in there, okay? So it's a good thing to assess your house, see what you're working with. So there's usually 3 light levels. So you have low light, okay? We hear this a lot. I want a plant that will grow in my deepest, darkest corner, okay? Every plant needs some form of light. There is no plant that will survive off of no light, right? A plastic one, yes. There's plants that will push the longest they can, more than others, but eventually will succumb if it doesn't have any light, okay? So low light is going to be, if you have a window here, right? Low light is going to be over here, right? Or low light can also count as, oh, I only have 2 hours of sunlight. It only gets 2 hours of sunlight at the end of the day. That can also count as low light. Very minuscule, not very much, right? And there is plants that do quite well in that situation, right? The snake plants, the ZZ plants, the peace lily also can tolerate a little bit of lower light as well. There's options for that. The more light that you can give something, the better, right? But just as long as it's getting a little something, something, okay? Medium light, it's in the room with a window, it's around, or your kitchen light is on very frequently, or at an office. Medium light is definitely like an office light, right? It's in the vicinity, the lights are on. This right here is going to be considered bright indirect light. It's filtered, right? It's filtered. It doesn't get all day. When the clouds come, this is considered bright indirect, okay? And then highlight is going to be 8 or more hours. This is your biggest window. This is bright light, okay? When it comes to spring and summertime, if you like to move your plants outside, that is a different story, I will say, okay? When we are hitting our bright light outside, it scorches everything. It'll scorch your fruit trees, it will scorch your flowers, it will scorch your inside plants. So if you have a plant, say, like the ponytail palm, this guy, and he likes bright and direct or slightly lower, that will be his lighting inside. Outside, you're going to want to have him under a patio or morning light, not the hot afternoon, because that's hot and that's really bright. Okay? So just remember that if you put your little guys outside, and it's totally fine to do so, it gets them good growth during the spring and summer. But just be mindful of where you put them, especially given our very, very hot summers. Most plants, right, in here, as long as it's not touching a window, even a plant that's considered low light, like a ZZ plant or a snake plant, they're considered low light. If you give it full light, that's totally fine. That's totally fine. A plant will never say no to too much light. What it will say no to is if it's touching a hot window, right? Or if it's near the brightest window you have and there's a heating vent. Then it's not going to be happy, but it's not going to be not happy because of the light, right? The lowest of low, I have one of these guys, and a grow light lives right above it, and there's a window about yay, right here, right? But if I wanted to put it in a room without a window and just a grow light over here, that's totally fine too. But you are going to get different results from the plant, right? If you're working with something like a philodendron here, this is a mini one. So with certain philodendrons and other certain plants, some of them have color, okay? And this color comes from as much light as you're going to give it. There's a really pretty pink philodendron, and the more light you give it, the more pink you're going to have. I have one of those at home, and it lives right in front of the window. Right in front of the window, and she's very, very pink. Something like this, a ring of fire, the more light it gets, the more orange it's going to get. This can handle lower light, but then it's going to be not as orange, if that makes sense. Okay? So one of the most important things is pots. Pots and what your plants are living in the soil. Okay? So with pots, I like to refer to them as shoes for us to think about, right? When you're younger, you don't go from size 3 to size 9. Or I'll grow into them. Okay? So we're going to talk about this guy, for example. This is a 4-inch pot. Growers go up by 2 inches. So most pots go up in 2-inch increments, okay? So we're looking at 4, 6, 8, 10, so on. So most of your plants are going to be in one of those. So when you transplant, so something like this guy, it's good to know what plant that you're having, first of all. So this guy right here is a pothos, little philodendron. This guy's going to trail. You can make him climb up something if you want to, but let's just say this guy's going to trail. So this pot right here has a drainage hole. It is attached to the saucer, but the water will come out. Okay? Drainage hole is the best, but if not, rocks at the bottom or take it out to water. Okay? So this guy would probably live in this pot happily it could sit in there for about a year. Okay? It's going to get nice and root bound. Certain plants like to be root bound. So it's good to know what kind you're working with. Does it like to be snug? Right? A good way to tell if something wants to be transplanted is if the roots, you start seeing the roots at the top, or the roots start coming out the bottom of the pot. Right? Whether that's plastic or in a ceramic pot. So with that being said, we will hear, oh, I have this nice pot. It's this big. I want to put an 8-inch pot in this pot. It is better to wait for it to actually fit into this pot. But I will say, if you want that, a good thing to do is to faux plant it. So you're going to keep it in the smaller pot, and it will visually look like it's planted in there, but when you water, you're just going to water where it is. Why is that? Because a plant of, say, this size, this is an 8-inch, sorry, this is probably more about a 10-inch pot, okay? Something like this is not going to be happy in a big pot full of extra soil. Extra soil, you're either going to underwater or overwater it, because this little guy is not going to be able to drink this much water if you soak it. Because in your head, you're like, thorough water. Not this little guy. It's like when you go out to eat pachos with your friends, it's easier to finish the plate with your friends. If you want to use a pot that's this big and you want to put your peace lily in it, you should put 3 or 4 peace lilies in it if you are set on that pot. Or you can do a little dish garden, find a plant that has the same water requirements and fill the pot with that, right? If you're set on something that's that big, fill it then, so then everyone can help soak up the water and everyone benefits from it. Okay? So there's that is a huge one. And one thing with transplanting that we hear quite frequently is if you want to leave it in a pot for an extended period of time, which is totally fine. Most plants live in a pot for a couple years in the increments. If it is a plant that likes to be root bound, okay, so that means it's going to live in there for a bit. Something like the ponytail palm, I have it in a pot. I like height. So it's about yay big and this big, okay? So I have it in a tall pot because this isn't going to get any bigger. It grows from here. And this is the same thing with things like corn plants, these guys up here, right? And Schefflera, ones that have a skinny base. Depth is more important rather than width. Depth is fine, or width is fine if you like that look, but just be mindful of how much soil is in it. So something like this, it's going to be top heavy and it's going to keep growing from the top. You're going to want a deep pot to counteract that, right? With that being said, the ones that like to be root bound, make sure that you're not too attached to the pot, because there might come a day where you need to smash it to transplant it. I will say that, okay? Some of the bigger ones are harder to transplant, but it is doable. So with that being said, I'll use this guy as an example. If you're transplanting a little guy, or anything around this height, this goes for these guys as well. A lot of these are just going to come out with a little squeeze, as so. I have a friend who transplanted her fiddly fig the other day, and she was very worried about upsetting the roots or hurting the roots. You cannot hurt the roots of a plant, okay? When we transplant anything here, we are taking scissors, knives, or sharp nails or your hands, and you're zhuzhing those roots, right? Especially ones that have been in a pot for an extended period of time. They're going to be nice and tight in there and they're all linked up, right? Before you transplant, you're going to be slicing those roots. It's letting them know you're going into a new home. It's okay to spread out. If you put it in a pot and it's like this, it's going to take a little bit longer for it to spread out, and the transplant might not be as nice or easygoing type thing. So with an amaryllis, for those who don't know, an amaryllis is a big bulb. It's the most beautiful flower. You find them around Christmas time. They're quite great. So with an amaryllis bulb, we have a few of them here. They're lovely. it's going to need a dormancy period, right? So if you want to be putting it out come, later spring into summer, I would get it into that dormancy period right now. Certain bulbs, you can either give it a dormancy period, right? Let it hibernate, or you can let it grow through. Some of ours, they'll just be a green leaf, and then eventually it will flower again. So the roots on the top, what I would do with that, if they're coming out, a great thing about amaryllis is they can have this big of a bulb and then that exact same size as a pot. It can just sit there, right? So if they're coming up out of the top, you're actually going to be pushing them down. Redirect them, right? Redirect them down, maybe put a little bit of more soil over top of them type thing. But it's not going to be coming out like that because anything's wrong. We have some here too that some of them are just a little bit funky. Redirect, right? It's like an orchid. A lot of the orchids, they get wild and funky roots. Redirect is always a good thing. If they're starting to take over, then it's time for a transplant. It's time for a transplant. But with amaryllis, you're going to redirect, maybe compact. You can even put little rocks on top of them just to redirect if you're going to push it through the season. Yeah. Those are lovely flowers though. Any plant can be transplanted between about end of February, March area, usually to September, okay, is the best time to transplant. If your plant is hurting and it's distressed and say that you accidentally overwatered and the only way to come back from it is to get it into dry, new soil, then you can do it anytime, okay? But transplanting season is usually about in the next 2 weeks to September because that's when houseplants start their growing and they're thriving a couple months. Yeah, and they just react better to transplanting in those months. And they're not like orchids. Orchids you shouldn't transplant when they're blooming. As soon as they're done blooming, feel free to transplant, right? But otherwise, all of these guys are totally fine to plant between those periods. Yeah, whether they're flowering, if you have a lipstick plant, a goldfish plant, anything like that, totally fine. So with potting, we're also going to quickly touch on the soil. Okay, so we have a tropical soil here and we also have a cactus soil. So something like the succulents, the cactus, the Haworthia, anything in this family is going to be cactus soil. Cactus soil is predominantly sand. It's predominantly sand. It's not going to hold a lot of moisture, which is perfect for these guys. For something like an aloe vera, you're going to be mixing cactus soil and tropical soil. Okay? An aloe vera will be completely fine in tropical soil if all else fails. These guys are not specific on fancy soils or fancy additives. They will grow in basic standard sand. So those are very easy, which is nice. With tropicals, we see a lot of different additives, especially nowadays, with certain plants like the philodendrons that like a lot of aeration and such. So with aeration, it's just having a fluffy soil, or we see a lot of people grow things like orchids or philodendrons, ones that have those aerial roots. They'll grow them in straight bark. Some people like to do some mixes of perlite. Perlite is a great additive for drainage and just keeping aeration in your soil, right? A bag like this is going to come with chunks of bark in it, soil, and all the other additives for aeration, right? It doesn't come with fertilizer already in it, none of those little bulbs, right? because fertilization you can do by yourself, and it's good to not have it in your house plants at all times. So with that being said, again, learning what plants you have and what kind of soil they do best in. I will say, if you like to create your own mixes and stuff, something like this, the less soil, the more often you're going to be watering. Because bark doesn't hold any moisture, right? It doesn't hold any moisture. There's people who are very passionate about certain varieties of plants, and philodendron are a big family. This is the same family as a monstera and all that, right? A monstera, this guy is technically in the same family, right? They do totally fine in standard soil. Totally fine in it. We have Maeve over here. We've had her for many, many years. She's a philodendron and she lives in tropical soil. The less soil, the more often you will be watering. I'm not kidding. You will be watering daily. Some people like that, and that's okay, right? You're going to get good aeration with that stuff. And there's some really neat mixes out there. I know some people who like to fertilize strictly with worm castings in their houseplants, right? Learn what plants you have and what makes them happy. But I will say most plants do fine with the standard mix. How to know when to repot an orchid. So repotting an orchid, like I said earlier in regards to the amaryllis, an orchid has those big kind of gray roots. Those are aerial roots. So when to know when to transplant one is those roots are going to be going everywhere. They're going to be growing out the bottom. That's a big one because they'll start to be a little off balance because they're very strong. Okay? So with that being said, they're going to be going everywhere. And then again, one pot size bigger for an orchid. Orchids are okay in pots like this, but they do like an airier pot. Like I said, orchid pots have holes all along the sides so then the roots can breathe. Right? They do fine in here. We grow some of them in here in our dish gardens. And again, as long as it has drainage, it's fine. Our orchids are all potted in sphagnum moss, right? Because they hold a little bit of moisture a little bit longer. And just given the conditions that they're in inside, which is not as much sunlight, that's how we choose to have them, is in that. But yeah. Usually when the air roots start going all over the place is when you transplant them. And again, not when they're blooming. So the blooms have to be finished, all gone, and then you can transplant it. One quick thing with the potting is if you have trailing plants, you can start them very young on a trellis. Or if you're working with a philodendron of any sort, you can start them on a piece of wood or a moss pole. So you can train it to go up. So this guy by itself is already standing up a little bit. But eventually he's going to start trailing because that's the natural habit. With philodendron, they start getting these little roots. You probably can't see it from there. But on this guy, there's little roots on it. Little itty bitty. Maeve has big roots. With those aerial roots, you can either start directing them into the soil for support, or you can give them something to attach to. They're not little arms. They don't hug a trellis. They're not going to hug it. But if you give it a flat piece of unsealed wood, it will attach to it. Or if you give it a moss pole, it will grow in it and attach to it, and it will grow up. I have one of these at home in my bathroom. I wrapped it around one of my ceramic butterflies, and it has attached itself to my wall. It just needed a flat surface, and it's sturdy and on there. It doesn't wreck your wall. I'll say that. It doesn't wreck your wall. So it's good. but it also does trail. If you like trailing, that's totally fine too. Okay. So we're going to lightly touch on some fertilizing. So we have this guy out here because a lot of people, if you do any other sort of gardening, most people will have a 20-20-20 on hand. This is good across the board. This is good for outside. This is fine for inside. 20-20-20, can't go wrong with it. And this goes with all different types of plants. 20-20-20 is fine for any of your citrus or anything like that as well. You're not going to be using 20-20-20 on cactus and succulents. They're not doing much. They don't need that much oomph. They don't. If any. There is a cactus and succulent fertilizer. This is something that you would give it when it's getting more light and it's outside, in summertime, stuff like that. These guys are water soluble. Water soluble is the best for house plants, period. Just because you're watering it already, it absorbs it better, it's even. Okay? Sometimes we see the fertilizer spikes. You'll see them for outside and stuff. Be mindful of those. It is sometimes better, crush them up and make them water soluble. A fertilizer stick is concentrating to only one area of the plant. It's slightly different when you're outside and it has a system and there's many trees and stuff like that. But for indoors, that's a high concentration for one spot. And then you can see some issues in the plant. So water soluble is best. And plants best absorb fertilizer after watering. Meaning, so if we water all these guys today, we're going to fertilize them tomorrow because the soil's still moist. You don't want to fertilize on dry soil, right? You want them to be awake, willing to take it, and already moist. It helps absorb better. So if you have just your standard house plants, you only have a couple, Schultz is a great one. And again, it's water soluble, a couple drips, it lasts a very, very long time. What's this guy here? This is our citrus. I don't know if anyone here has grown citrus. Citrus is what we have all along the sides here. Citrus grow inside. You can put them outside during late spring and summer, but the citrus that we have here are considered indoor plants, and thankfully they're dwarf, so they're not going to be a full orange tree in your house, but they're quite lovely. There is a specific fertilizer for those guys as they flower and produce fruit like any other fruit tree, so they do feed more than your average house plant. Okay? And then we have a palm and tropical as well. This stuff is going to be slow release. So slow release are the little beads, the green beads or white beads that you see. That's slow release. So over time as you water, it's going to break down and stuff like that. So if you wanted to start something on slow release, it's going to be something that's not a heavy feeder. So like it says on here, palm trees, not a heavy feeder, right? They're not flowering, none of that. So slow release is going to be put in and sprinkled on top in March, and then you can feed it through, right? And you can give it a little dose of something like this on top. Come later, spring and summer, when it's in its full peak. That's totally fine. Water soluble is really good because then you can keep track of it on the calendar. I fertilized here. And then during growing season, depending on the plant, is it a flowering plant? You're going to be fertilizing it more often. And by more often, once every 2 weeks, totally fine. in summertime with all of our tropicals, we're on a fertilizer schedule of that once every 2 weeks, right? And you're going to be doing it. We usually start May when it's nice and hot through to August, and then we stop, right? Some plants don't need fertilizer. Again, we're looking at the succulents and cactus. If you have a powerful flowering cactus fertilizer, right? Not all cactus flower, but some do. These guys, very slow. They don't need fertilizer, right? And because they absorb all the water through their entire body of the plant, fertilizer is a little risky on these guys. I'll quickly go over some of the easiest houseplants. So when I say easy, it's forgiving if you forget to water it. And if you forget about it, it's in a dark corner for a little bit, not getting as much light, it's going to forgive you, right? So the ZZ plant, this guy I would almost put into the same family as a cactus or a succulent. It is very easygoing. Very easygoing. Under the soil, these have big root bulbs that store water. And the only way to really upset these plants is to overwater. So too frequent of a watering will upset these guys, and they will rot from the bottom up. And it's hard to save. So the drier, the better. I have one. I water it once every 2 months. And it's under a full grow light. Reminder, everyone's houses are different. So you may be watering yours once every 3 weeks, right? If you have a really hot house or you decide to put it outside. But these guys are great. They grow in the same way that snake plants grow. So snake plants grow and fill out the pot from the bottom up. These guys do the same thing, right? This little guy right here is going to grow into a new leaf, and eventually this whole thing will fill out. These are a great, easy plant, and you still get that lush leaf on it. Unlike a succulent, which is a little more compact, a little less impact. This, you're still getting the easiness, but you get the look of a nice green plant. And these also come in black as well, very black. A Raven ZZ, and it's quite the statement piece. This guy, Ponytail Palm, is one of my favorites. I have one in my bathroom. These are great plants. If you have a cat, this is going to be a fan favorite. I will say that, okay? If you have animals, especially a cat, anything that's wispy, like a spider plant, is going to be a fan favorite. Thankfully, these guys are okay. They're not going to cause any damage to your animal. With that also being said, with houseplants and animals, I have a dog and a cat. Things like these, and these guys as well, they're not great to chew on. They might irritate your animal, okay? They might throw it up, something like that. These are not dangerous to your animal. Philodendron or anything like a ficus, if you break it or a leaf falls off, there's that white sap. Anything that bleeds, that is a little bit more sketchy to an animal, okay? Just to keep in mind, some don't pay attention to it, which is totally fine, right? A good rule of thumb is houseplants are going to irritate. Flowers, like a lily, highly dangerous. If you want to know how your plants are for animals, a quick Google search, thankfully. But I will say that anything wispy is going to attract them very much. We have Stanley here, our cat Stanley who lives here, and he is alive and kicking. He's fine. So another plant that's super easy is the classic spider plant. This is very easy. But make sure that you have a lot of friends because it's going to have a lot of babies. These plants put off shoots as they get older, and it has little baby spider plants on the end. So you can keep them all for yourself, Facebook Marketplace, or give them to your friends. But these guys are great. These are considered, both of these, the peace lily also, these are on the air purifying plant list. Also touching base on that if you have your average size living room, for example, a peace lily, even a larger peace lily, one peace lily is not going to purify your living room. Right? All plants have some level of helping clean the air. But one isn't going to purify your living room. But if you put 3 different large plants in your bathroom or something, then a bathroom is smaller. That air is going to be more purified, right? If you're someone who likes to collect a lot of plants, then your living room is going to be very purified. I will say that. Touching base on the peace lily, this is one of the only houseplants that flowers. There is a few trailing ones that flower, like the goldfish and the lipstick plant. Peace lilies are one of the classic plants. These look good everywhere, do well in most spots, except in direct sun. Outside, we have to hide these guys once our greenhouse opens because any high heat will scorch these leaves. This is actually one of Maury's favorite plants. So this is one of the boss's favorite plants, and he has one on his desk that he has had for 5 years. And the best part about these is they will wilt heavily when they need to be watered. You water them, within 20, 30 minutes they pop back up. Very forgiving. And these guys will bloom nice white flowers. And something to remember with these is the older the flower, it's going to die off. You're not doing anything wrong. It'll die off to make room for new ones. And it blooms all by itself. It'll come and go. These also come in a lovely variegated one that we also have. This is a type of pothos, pearl and jade. Pothos are highly popular for how easy they are, and they can fill up a space very quickly, and you can make it go across your living room. Some people put it across their ceiling or just have it hang down, their staircase or something like that. These are a great plant. These also do very well in just water, shockingly. I grow one in the office in just water. It was a cutting, and I just haven't planted it. African violets. Yeah. So they're not going to flower at all times. So again, fertilizer. They need a period of just regrouping, hanging out after they bloom, right? We have a lot of African violets here. They're lovely. To get them to reflower again is going to be like any other thing that flowers, is it needs that dormancy period of hanging out. Let it be. And then you're going to fertilize. To get something to rebloom, it needs as much light as you can give it. As much light as you can give it. African violet would do great in lighting like this. Filtered, or given that it's February, it could be in front of a window. To rebloom, as much light as possible. Stay good on your watering. And give it the fertilizer. Water soluble. And African violets do good with this guy. Yeah. Yeah. But light is key for reblooming. If there's anything that's not pretty on your plant, a yellow leaf, a brown leaf, if it gets sunburnt by chance, take it off. It's not going to recover. It's not going to, if it looks like that, that's how it's going to stay looking. If you take it off, that is best because it sucks the energy out of the plant. The less energy sucking, the better. Okay, so yellow, too much water or accidentally overwatered is a good rule of thumb. Okay. Brown, I get brown on the tips of one of these a lot. Brown is humidity. Brown tips is lack of humidity, right? I have mine in my bathroom and mine still has brown tips. Like there's still tropical plants. It's a weird time of year. Come summertime and spring, they do a lot better. But again, that plate of humidity is great. Or a quick hose in the shower, stuff like that. And in an enclosed area, they do great. I know some people who will take a big bin, a plastic bin, put all their plants into it and mist, and it keeps it in here and nice and humidified. But yeah, brown is lack of humidity. Sometimes with yellow, you're going to, like if it's yellow and it's wilting, right? At this time of year, it might have gotten cold, right? And if you're seeing any sort of black in any of the middle of the leaves at all, root rot, and it needs to dry out, or you need to get it out of that pot, rinsed off, and into dry soil as quickly as you can. That's kind of the rule of thumb. Yellow, too much water. Brown, it just needs some humidity. And thankfully it doesn't hurt the plant if you just take the brown tips off. Certain plants are more susceptible to browning, like calatheas. I don't know if anyone has one of those. Those are one of the most dramatic plants, right? And sometimes you can be doing everything right, and sometimes it will still brown. And that just happens, unfortunately. And I wish it didn't, but it does. So yeah, rule of thumb, yellow, water, brown, humidity. A ZZ plant, so these are going to grow up and then kind of flare out, right? And then if you wanted to have more height, you'd plant it in a taller, thinner pot. But given that area, our smaller ones are over there. But Scheffleras, these guys, are amazing plants. Amazing plants. Yeah, Scheffleras are great. Dracaena, there's many different kinds of Dracaena. These guys and this little braided one over here are in the same family. Dracaenas are very easy care. Again, they're forgiving. You can dry out and it will forgive you. And a great thing with these also is if it's getting too tall, you can hack it. It'll look a little bit weird for a bit, but they will grow offshoots in time. So for that area of your house, I would say Schefflera, Dracaena, even a money tree. A money tree is also very easy care as well. Anything that needs high light, so you're looking at palms, ficus, anything like that, probably not. But I do want to remind everyone that everyone's house is different. And if anything I've said, you're like, oh, well, I have a plant and I don't do that and it's alive and thriving. I'm always team, if it's happy and thriving, don't change anything. So that will conclude my seminar. Thank you for coming and hanging out with me. I appreciate it. If you have any questions, then you can come see me. Yeah, thank you.